Human pulls the alien girl out of a mud pit, and the alien girl says the mud tried to keep him instead. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's return to our main characters. Ethan had never expected a simple hike to turn into anything out of the ordinary. He was in a remote forest, on a planet far from Earth, trying to explore and discover the unknown. But now, here he was, struggling against thick, sticky mud that seemed determined to hold on to him, as if it had a life of its own. Just a few yards away, a figure was stuck, half submerged in the pit of mud. The figure was a girl. No, not just any girl. This was Zara, an alien, and not just any alien. Her glowing eyes and the slight shimmer of her skin revealed her otherworldly nature. Ethan had encountered her by pure chance, and now he couldn't stand by and watch her struggle. With all his strength, he reached into the mud and grabbed hold of her wrist, pulling with all his might. For a moment, he felt like the mud was fighting back, like it was alive, trying to pull them both deeper into its sticky embrace. His muscles burned, but he didn't give up. Finally, with one last heave, he pulled Zara free. She collapsed against him, gasping for air, her clothes soaked and heavy with mud. Ethan helped her to her feet, still panting from the exertion. For a moment, there was silence. Then Zara, with a quiet but firm voice, spoke. The mud tried to keep you here. It's not just mud. It's alive. It wants to trap us both. Ethan blinked, not sure if he had heard her correctly. What do you mean? He asked, still trying to catch his breath. Zara's gaze shifted to the muddy pit they had just escaped from, her expression a mix of caution and curiosity. This place, it's a living entity. The mud is part of it. It feeds off the energy of beings who stumble into it. You were lucky to escape. Ethan looked back at the pit, then at Zara. Her alien features were as strange to him as the situation they had just survived. He could still feel the weird, almost magnetic pull of the mud on his body, and it sent a shiver down his spine. He didn't know what he had just gotten himself into, but he was certain of one thing. This was just the beginning. And now, with Zara at his side, he would have to face whatever else this strange world had in store for them. As Ethan and Zara stood together, catching their breath, the eerie quiet of the forest seemed to close in around them. The thick, gooey mud they had just escaped from now lay still, almost as if it were waiting for them to make the next move. Zara, still shivering from the cold grip of the mud, looked at Ethan with a serious expression. You don't understand, she said, her voice low and urgent. This place isn't what it seems. The mud, it's only one part of something much larger. Ethan frowned, glancing back at the pit. What do you mean by that? It feels like we just narrowly escaped something alive. Zara nodded slowly, her eyes scanning the dense trees around them, as if she were searching for something. The mud, the trees, the ground beneath us, it's all connected. This planet has a way of pulling in beings from other places, trapping them, using their energy to keep itself alive. And it won't stop. Not until it gets what it wants. Ethan's stomach turned. He had no idea how he had ended up on this alien world, but everything about it felt wrong. The air was thick with an unnatural heaviness, and the deeper they ventured, the more he felt like they were being watched. So what are we supposed to do? He asked, trying to keep his voice steady. Zara looked at him, her face softening just a little. We need to get to higher ground. The mud has a way of pulling things down, but the higher we go, the safer we'll be, for now. Ethan nodded, though the sense of unease hadn't left him. He turned his attention to their surroundings. The forest, while strange and unfamiliar, had a certain beauty to it. The trees were tall and twisted, their bark glowing faintly in the dim light. Vines hung from the branches like tendrils, swaying gently as if moved by an invisible force. It was as if the forest itself was alive, breathing with them. As they moved cautiously through the trees, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that something was following them. The air seemed to thicken with each step they took, pressing in on them from all sides. Zara, sensing his discomfort, spoke again. It's watching us. Whatever this planet is, it's aware of our presence. The energy we brought with us, it's attracting it. Ethan looked at her, his heart racing. What kind of energy? Zara hesitated, then said, the energy of life. Yours. Mine. It's the reason we're both still alive. But it's also the reason we're being hunted. Ethan felt a chill crawl up his spine. Hunted? Zara nodded, her eyes now alert, scanning the shadows. Yes, there are things on this planet, things that feed on life. They're drawn to the energy we carry. Ethan's mind raced. He had no idea what kind of planet this was, but he was beginning to understand that it wasn't just the mud they had to worry about. Something much worse was waiting, and it seemed to be drawing closer with every passing moment. They moved quickly, their footsteps barely making a sound on the soft ground beneath them. Ethan could feel his heart pounding in his chest, each beat echoing in his ears. He kept his eyes on Zara, who seemed to be leading them with confidence, despite the danger they faced. They couldn't stay here long. Ethan didn't know what was worse, the terrifying thought of the creatures hunting them, or the strange, ominous feeling that everything around them was alive, watching their every move. All he knew was that they had to get out, and fast. The tension between them grew as they pushed deeper into the forest, the shadows growing darker, the air heavier. Ethan knew they couldn't afford to make a wrong move. Every step, every breath, was a calculated risk. And yet, despite everything, he couldn't help but feel that their survival depended on something more than just escaping the dangers of this planet. It was as if they had to understand the planet itself, its secrets, and its hidden forces. But the question remained, would they uncover the truth in time, or would they become another lost energy source for this dark, living world? The dense forest continued to close in around them as Ethan and Zara moved quickly, their footsteps light against the soft, uneven ground. Despite Zara's warnings, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. He felt an unsettling pressure building, as if the very air was aware of their presence, like the trees and the ground itself were quietly waiting for them to make a mistake. Zara, her expression hardening as she led the way, glanced over her shoulder every few steps. Her glowing eyes scanned their surroundings with a sharpness that Ethan could only admire. She wasn't afraid, but she was cautious, always looking for signs of danger. We're getting close, she said quietly, her voice barely a whisper. There's a clearing up ahead. It's the only place we can rest safely for a moment. Ethan nodded, though his mind was racing with questions. What was really going on here? What kind of planet was this? And what were these creatures Zara had mentioned? He knew he had to trust her, but something deep inside him kept warning him to be careful. As they moved toward the clearing, the trees began to thin, and a strange glow filled the air. It wasn't sunlight, it was something else. The light was soft and pulsing, like the heartbeat of the planet itself. Ethan looked up to see the sky above them, a strange purple hue that seemed to shimmer with life. The air here felt different, lighter, as though the ground beneath them was alive, breathing. This place, Ethan said, looking around, it feels strange. Like it's alive. Zara nodded, her expression grim. It is alive. Not in the way you're used to, but in its own way. The entire planet is one living organism, and everything here is connected. The trees, the soil, the air, it all shares the same energy. And that energy is what keeps it alive. Ethan swallowed hard, trying to make sense of her words. So the mud, that was part of the planet. Zara's eyes met his, and for a moment, there was a flicker of something like sadness in them. Yes, she said softly. The mud is just one part of the planet's way of feeding. It traps beings and feeds off their energy. But there are other parts of this planet, more dangerous parts, that are far worse. Ethan felt a chill run down his spine. What kind of parts? Zara took a deep breath, her eyes scanning the area as though searching for something in the distance. There are creatures here, creatures that live off the life force of other beings. They feed on our energy, on our very existence. They're drawn to it, and once they find it, they don't stop. Ethan's heart raced. How do we survive them? How do we get out of here? Zara paused, then spoke with a quiet determination. We have to reach the heart of the planet. There, we can find the source of its power and shut it down. But it won't be easy. The creatures won't let us get that far without a fight. Ethan didn't hesitate. I'm in, he said, his voice steady. Lead the way. Zara gave him a brief nod, her face hardening with resolve. Together, they moved deeper into the forest, the glowing light from the clearing fading as they entered the shadows once more. Ethan could feel the tension building again, and he knew that whatever they faced next would be their greatest challenge yet. But for now, all he could do was trust Zara and hope that they could reach the heart of the planet before the creatures hunting them found their trail. Time was running out, and the darkness of the forest seemed to close in tighter with each passing minute. As Ethan and Zara moved deeper into the shadowy forest, the air grew thick with an unsettling tension. The light from the glowing clearing had long faded, replaced by the deep, inky darkness of the woods. Every step felt heavier, as if the ground beneath them was pulling at their feet, urging them to stay. Ethan could feel his heart pounding in his chest, but he kept his pace steady, trusting Zara to lead the way. She seemed unbothered by the growing darkness, her glowing eyes flickering as she navigated the winding path. The trees here were even stranger than the ones they had passed earlier, taller, with bark that shimmered faintly like starlight, and their branches twisted in unnatural shapes. It was as if the forest itself had been bent and shaped by something ancient, something far older than anything Ethan could understand. How much farther? Ethan asked, trying to keep the anxiety from his voice. Zara didn't answer right away, her focus fully on the path ahead. She was listening, feeling the vibrations in the air, sensing the subtle changes around them. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, she spoke. "We're close," she said. "But we need to be careful. The creatures are getting closer." Ethan felt his skin crawl at the thought. He had no idea what these creatures were, but everything about this planet screamed danger. As if to confirm Zara's words, a low, distant hum seemed to rise from the ground beneath them. It was faint at first, but then it grew louder, almost like a heartbeat, a steady rhythm that pulsed through the air. Zara stopped in her tracks, her eyes scanning the trees. "They're here," she whispered. Ethan's breath caught in his throat as he turned to look around, but the shadows of the forest were thick, concealing whatever lurked within them. The hum was getting louder now, the pulse of it vibrating in his chest. He glanced at Zara, whose face was tense, every muscle in her body coiled like a spring. She raised a hand, signaling for him to stay quiet, and Ethan obeyed, barely daring to breathe. The humming continued, but now it was joined by other sounds, faint rustlings, whispers that seemed to come from all directions. Then, through the trees, a shape moved, too quick for Ethan to follow. A figure, tall and shadowy, slithered through the underbrush, its movements unnaturally fluid, like something that wasn't quite human. The sound of its footsteps was muffled by the thick leaves, but the pulse in the air grew more intense, the heartbeat louder and faster. Ethan's heart raced in response, and his instincts screamed at him to run. But Zara's grip on his arm tightened, and her voice was steady, almost calm. "Do not move," she whispered. "It senses fear. If you run, it will chase." Ethan nodded, doing his best to steady his breathing, trying to force his body to calm down. He didn't know what these creatures were, but Zara seemed to have experience with them. If she said staying still was their best chance, he would trust her. The shape moved closer, its presence felt in the air long before it became visible. Ethan could almost feel the weight of it, pressing down on him. Then, through the shadows, it emerged, a tall figure with pale, shimmering skin, its eyes glowing faintly in the dark. It paused, its head tilting slightly, as if it were sensing them, studying them. Ethan held his breath, his entire body frozen in place. The creature's gaze shifted toward him, and for a brief moment, their eyes locked. There was an intensity in the creature's stare, an almost knowing look, as if it understood everything about him in an instant. Zara's grip tightened, and she whispered, "Stay still. Don't make a sound." The creature took a step forward, its movements slow and deliberate. Ethan could hear the sound of its breath, shallow and quick, like it was waiting for something. Then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, the creature turned and vanished back into the shadows, its form melting into the darkness as though it had never been there at all. The pulse in the air slowly began to fade, and Zara let out a quiet breath, releasing her grip on Ethan's arm. "That," she said, her voice low, "was one of them. A sentinel. It was testing us." Ethan stood still for a moment, processing what had just happened. "What do you mean, testing us?" Zara's eyes narrowed as she surveyed the forest around them. "It wanted to see if we were a threat. It can sense fear, anger, anything that might make us dangerous. And it will report back to the others. Ethan's stomach turned. What happens if it tells them we're a threat? Zara glanced at him, her face serious. Then we run out of time. The others will come for us. They moved on, the weight of the encounter heavy in the air, and Ethan knew that no matter how close they were to the heart of the planet, they were running out of time. The creatures were hunting them now, and they wouldn't stop until they were caught. The forest seemed to grow darker with every passing minute, the air thick with an oppressive silence. Ethan and Zara continued their hurried pace, their movements cautious, every step measured. The encounter with the sentinel had left a lingering sense of unease, and despite their best efforts, the weight of the unknown pressed down on them from all sides. Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that the planet itself was alive, watching them, and that every rustle of leaves or shift in the air was a reminder that danger was never far away. Zara's eyes remained sharp, constantly scanning their surroundings. Her movements were fluid, almost predatory, as if she had become one with the forest. Ethan, on the other hand, felt like an outsider, an intruder on a world that was not his own. "How do we get to the heart of the planet?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Zara's expression remained unreadable as she glanced back at him. "We're close," she said, her voice steady, though there was an edge of urgency to it. "But the closer we get, the more the creatures will sense us. We need to keep moving, but we cannot afford to make any mistakes." Ethan nodded, his nerves on edge. The path ahead seemed endless, the dense trees blocking their way, and the eerie hum of the planet's heartbeat grew louder, more insistent, as if urging them to hurry. The air was growing heavier, pressing down on them like a physical weight. Suddenly, Zara stopped, her head snapping to the side, her eyes narrowing as she listened. Ethan followed her gaze, but saw nothing, only the thick shadows of the forest stretching out before them. "What is it?" Ethan asked, his voice barely audible. Zara's eyes flicked back to him, her expression hard. "They're getting closer," she said, her voice low. "We don't have much time." Ethan's pulse quickened. "What should we do?" Zara took a deep breath, her gaze shifting to the trees above them. "We need to hide. Now." Without another word, she moved swiftly, grabbing Ethan's arm and pulling him toward a nearby cluster of thick vines. They crouched down, the weight of their bodies making the soft ground beneath them shift. Zara's eyes remained fixed on the dark shadows of the trees, her breath steady and controlled. Ethan's heart pounded in his chest, but he kept as still as possible, trying to control his breathing. The humming from earlier had grown louder, now accompanied by faint whispers, voices that seemed to be coming from all directions. Ethan couldn't tell if it was his imagination or if the planet itself was speaking, but it didn't matter. They were being hunted. From the corner of his eye, he saw a flicker of movement in the shadows. A shape, tall and elongated, stepped out from behind a massive tree. The creature was barely visible, its body blending seamlessly with the darkness around it. Ethan held his breath, praying it hadn't noticed them. The creature's movements were slow, methodical, as if it was searching for something. Its head tilted slightly, as if it were sensing the air, trying to pick up any trace of them. The humming grew louder, and Ethan's heart raced as he realized it was coming from the creature itself. It was using the planet's energy to track them, and it was getting closer. Zara's grip on Ethan's arm tightened, but she made no sound. She didn't move, didn't even breathe as the creature passed just a few feet away from them. Ethan could feel the heat radiating from its body, the strange energy pulsing from it like a living thing. It moved past them, its attention fixed on something ahead, and for a long moment, Ethan was certain that they had been seen. But then, the creature's steps faltered, and it turned, disappearing back into the shadows as silently as it had come. Zara waited, her body tense, before she slowly let go of Ethan's arm. "That," she whispered, her voice barely audible, "was another one. Another sentinel." Ethan's mind raced, trying to understand. "How many of them are there?" Zara didn't answer right away. She was already moving again, pulling Ethan forward, deeper into the shadows. "Enough to make this impossible if we don't stay ahead. Let's go." The air around them was thick, suffocating, and with every step they took, the pulse of the planet seemed to grow stronger, louder. It was as if the planet itself was aware of their every move, urging them forward, but with each passing moment, the creatures were closing in. Time was running out. They had to reach the heart of the planet before it was too late, before the sentinels and the creatures hunting them became unstoppable. Ethan could feel the weight of their task pressing down on him, but there was no turning back now. They couldn't afford to fail. The forest seemed to close in even more as Ethan and Zara pressed forward, the shadows growing deeper with every step they took. The air felt heavier now, as if the very atmosphere was thick with the tension of their pursuit. The planet's pulse, that strange rhythmic hum that seemed to emanate from the ground, was louder than ever, vibrating through Ethan's chest with each step. Zara moved like a shadow, her eyes darting from side to side, every sense on high alert. Ethan kept close behind, trying to match her pace, but he could feel the sweat on his brow, his breath coming faster as the fear of being caught gnawed at him. The creatures, those sentinels, were still out there, somewhere in the darkness, tracking them with an unnatural precision. He could feel their presence, even if he couldn't see them. Every rustle of the leaves, every whisper of movement in the trees, made his heart skip a beat. He wanted to ask Zara how much farther they had to go, but he knew better than to break the silence. The creatures could be anywhere, and any noise could draw them in. Time was running out. "We're almost there," Zara said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Stay close, and don't make a sound." Ethan nodded, his pulse racing. They had been moving for hours, but they had no choice but to keep going. If they stopped now, they might never get another chance to reach the heart of the planet. The path ahead was getting steeper, the terrain more difficult to navigate. The dense forest had given way to rocky ground, and Ethan's boots scraped against the rough stones as he climbed. The air was colder here, and he could see his breath fogging in front of him. Zara had no trouble moving through the rocky landscape, her agility unmatched. She was used to this, Ethan realized. She had been here before, and she knew what she was doing. He followed her lead, trying to ignore the fatigue that was starting to creep into his limbs. They had to reach the heart of the planet before the sentinels found them. They had to find a way to stop the creatures before it was too late. Suddenly, Zara stopped in her tracks, her head snapping up as she listened. Ethan froze, his heart pounding in his chest. There it was again, the hum, louder now, as though it was coming from all around them. The ground beneath them seemed to vibrate with the intensity of it, and Ethan felt a deep, unsettling tremor in his bones. "They've found us," Zara whispered, her eyes wide with alarm. Before Ethan could react, Zara grabbed his arm and pulled him into a narrow crevice between two large rocks. The space was tight, but it was the only cover they had. They crouched low, holding their breath as the humming grew louder, the presence of the sentinels unmistakable. The air was thick with energy now, and Ethan could feel the tension in the atmosphere, like a storm was about to break. From their hiding place, they could see the creatures moving through the trees below them. The sentinels were tall, their bodies shadowy and indistinct, but their glowing eyes shone brightly in the darkness, scanning the area with a predatory precision. Ethan held his breath, his heart racing. The sentinels were moving closer, their steps slow and deliberate, as if they were searching for something. He felt the weight of their gaze, even though they couldn't see him. The creature's eyes seemed to glow with an otherworldly light, flickering in the darkness like distant stars. Zara kept perfectly still beside him, her body tense, every muscle coiled. She didn't make a sound, her breathing barely audible. Ethan glanced over at her, and he saw the determination in her eyes. She was ready to move, ready to fight if necessary. He just hoped they wouldn't have to. The sentinels paused below them, their glowing eyes sweeping the area, and for a moment, Ethan thought they had been spotted. But then, with a sudden, fluid movement, the creatures turned and disappeared back into the forest, melting into the shadows as quickly as they had appeared. Zara didn't move for a long time, waiting for the creatures to be completely gone. When she finally spoke, her voice was low and controlled. "They're not gone. They're waiting for us to make a mistake. We need to move, now." With that, she pulled Ethan to his feet, and they continued their climb up the rocky terrain, their every movement quick and silent. They couldn't afford to waste any more time. The heart of the planet was within reach, but the sentinels were closing in, and they were running out of time. Ethan pushed his fear aside and focused on the path ahead, trusting Zara to lead the way. If they didn't get to the heart soon, they wouldn't survive the night. The climb had become even more treacherous. The jagged rocks beneath Ethan's feet were slick with moisture, the steep incline making each step feel like a battle against gravity itself. The dense canopy above them blocked out most of the light, leaving only the faintest sliver of starlight to guide their way. Every few moments, a low rumble echoed through the air, like the planet itself was groaning in response to their presence. Ethan could feel the planet's pulse beneath his feet, the rhythmic hum vibrating through the ground. It was impossible to ignore. The sentinels were still out there, somewhere below them, and they were getting closer. Zara moved ahead, her movements fluid and calculated. She didn't seem to be struggling at all, as if the climb was effortless for her. Ethan, on the other hand, was exhausted. His legs burned with every step, and the weight of the situation pressed down on him like a vice. He couldn't afford to slow down. If they didn't reach the heart of the planet soon, they would be caught. The thought of the sentinels closing in on them, their glowing eyes piercing the darkness, made Ethan's heart race. He tried to shake the image from his mind, focusing instead on the rock face in front of him and on Zara's steady form as she led the way. They had to make it. They had no other choice. As they climbed higher, the terrain became less forgiving. The rocks were sharper, and the air was thinner. Ethan's breath came in ragged gasps as he pushed himself forward, trying to keep up with Zara's pace. She was relentless, not showing any signs of fatigue. Finally, after what felt like hours, they reached a narrow ledge. Zara turned to face Ethan, her eyes glinting in the dim light. "We're almost there," she said, her voice steady, though Ethan could hear the tension in it. "But we need to move quickly. The creatures won't stop until they find us." Ethan nodded, his throat dry as he took a moment to catch his breath. He glanced around, but there was nothing but the endless expanse of dark rock and twisted trees. It felt like they were on the edge of the world, isolated and vulnerable. Zara began moving again, and Ethan followed her closely, his every muscle screaming for rest, but he pushed it aside. They had to reach the heart. As they moved forward, the air grew colder, the chill creeping into their bones. The pulse of the planet seemed to be resonating more intensely now, the vibrations reverberating through the very rocks beneath their feet. It was as if the heart of the planet was calling to them, pulling them closer. The hum was almost deafening, and Ethan could feel the tension in the air growing thicker. Zara's pace quickened, and Ethan followed, desperate to keep up. He didn't know what awaited them at the heart, but it was their only hope. The creatures were close now, and he could feel their presence even before he saw them. There was a strange energy in the air, an almost electric charge, and the hairs on the back of his neck stood on end. They had to reach the heart, but with each passing second, the danger increased. The sentinels were close, and they weren't going to let them reach their destination without a fight. Zara's movements became more urgent, and Ethan pushed himself harder, ignoring the burning pain in his legs. He had to keep going. They were so close, and yet, the closer they got to the heart, the more the air seemed to hum with danger. It was as if the very planet was alive, aware of their presence, and determined to stop them from reaching their goal. The darkness seemed to press in around them, the shadows deepening as they moved forward, but Ethan couldn't afford to look back. They had to keep going, and the heart was their only chance. Time was running out. They couldn't stop now. They had reached the final stretch. Ethan and Zara were no longer climbing. They were rushing now, moving faster than they ever had before. The cold air of the rocky path had turned into something almost unbearable, biting through their clothing, but neither of them slowed down. The planet's pulse, its heartbeat, was so loud now that it was almost all Ethan could hear. It was vibrating through his entire body, each beat like a thunderclap in his chest. The ground beneath their feet felt like it was shifting with every step they took. They were close, so close to the heart of the planet, but they could feel the presence of the creatures drawing near as well. The sentinels were closing in, and the tension was thick in the air. Zara's movements had become more erratic, faster, as though the weight of time was pressing down on her. She glanced back at Ethan, her face tight with urgency. "We're almost there. Just a little further. Keep up." Ethan pushed himself harder, his legs burning, his breath short. The jagged rocks underfoot scraped against his boots, but he didn't care. Every part of his body screamed for rest, but rest was a luxury they didn't have. They had to reach the heart, or everything they had done so far would have been for nothing. The closer they got, The more the hum of the planet seemed to consume them, like it was pulling them in, beckoning them towards something ancient and powerful. The air grew heavier, charged with an almost electric energy, and it seemed to press down on Ethan's chest, making each breath harder to take. They rounded the final bend, and there it was, the heart of the planet. It wasn't a place he could have ever imagined. It was a vast, glowing cavern, filled with swirling lights and energy. The ground beneath them wasn't rock, but some sort of smooth, transparent surface, like glass, stretching out in every direction. Above them, the ceiling shimmered, alive with brilliant colors, like the sky at sunset but brighter, more intense. The planet's pulse, its heartbeat, was coming from the center of the cavern, radiating outward in waves. It was as though the heart of the world itself was alive, and they had arrived just in time. But the feeling of triumph was short-lived. As soon as they stepped into the cavern, the ground seemed to tremble, and the air around them hummed even louder. From the shadows of the cavern, figures began to appear, more sentinels. They were tall and fluid, their glowing eyes scanning the cavern, searching for them. Zara immediately tensed beside Ethan, her eyes darting toward the creatures. She grabbed his arm, pulling him toward the center of the cavern. "Move. We have no time." They ran toward the glowing core in the middle of the cavern, but the sentinels were fast, too fast. Ethan could feel their presence closing in, the temperature around them rising as the sentinels moved closer. Every instinct in his body screamed for him to run faster, but it was like the cavern itself was trying to hold them back, slowing them down with its intense energy. They had to reach the core. They had no choice. The sentinels were closing in, and time was running out. The heart of the planet was their only hope, the only chance they had to survive. With every step, Ethan's heart pounded louder, matching the rhythm of the planet's pulse. It was as if everything in the universe had aligned in this moment, and they were standing at the center of it all, with the sentinels hunting them down. Zara was ahead, her steps sure and fast. Ethan pushed himself forward, his body protesting, but he refused to stop. They were so close. The sentinels' eyes gleamed from the shadows as they closed in, and the air thickened with energy, almost suffocating. It was a race now, a race to reach the heart of the planet before the sentinels reached them. Ethan didn't look back. He couldn't. All that mattered was moving forward. They had to get to the heart. They had to stop the planet's pulse before it was too late. The heart of the planet pulsed with a fierce, rhythmic hum, vibrating through the very ground beneath Ethan's feet. The glowing core in the center of the cavern shimmered, casting an eerie light across the vast space. It was alive, breathing with an energy so intense, it felt as if the entire planet was holding its breath. Ethan and Zara were closing in on it, but the sentinels were getting closer too, their glowing eyes scanning the cavern, moving in fast, silent strides. Ethan could feel his heart pounding in sync with the planet's pulse, the weight of the moment pressing down on him. His legs burned, each step heavier than the last, but he couldn't stop. They were so close now. Zara was ahead, her face focused and determined. She moved with an almost supernatural grace, her eyes fixed on the core. But Ethan could feel the creatures closing in, their presence suffocating, the tension in the air growing thicker with each passing second. They had to reach the core. The sentinels weren't just tracking them anymore. They were hunting them, and if they didn't get to the heart in time, they would be trapped. Zara glanced back at Ethan, her eyes filled with urgency. "We can't stop now," she shouted, her voice nearly drowned out by the hum of the planet. Ethan nodded, pushing his body harder, his breath coming in quick, ragged gasps. He could hear the sentinels' footsteps, faint at first, but growing louder. They were right. Behind them, the glowing core was so close now that he could feel its energy pulling at him, drawing him in. It was as if the planet itself was reaching out to him, waiting for him to make the final move. The sentinels were nearly upon them, their eyes fixed on Ethan and Zara, tracking their every movement. The air felt electrified, and every step seemed to take everything Ethan had left in him. The cavern's energy was becoming overwhelming, and he had to fight to keep his focus. Then, without warning, Zara darted toward the center of the glowing core, her body moving faster than Ethan thought possible. He followed her, his heart in his throat, the sentinels closing in, their presence a shadow in the corner of his vision. As Zara reached the core, she turned back to Ethan, her eyes filled with a mix of relief and desperation. "Now," she shouted, and in one fluid motion, she raised her hand and pressed it against the heart of the planet. The core seemed to react immediately, sending a shockwave of energy through the cavern. The ground trembled beneath their feet, and the air grew thick with power. Ethan could feel it in his bones, the energy pulsing around him. He reached the core just as Zara stepped back, and he placed his hand on the glowing surface, his palm burning with the intensity of the planet's power. It was as if time itself had stopped. The sentinels had halted, their glowing eyes now fixed on the core. The pulse of the planet began to slow, and the cavern seemed to breathe, as if it was alive and aware of what was happening. The sentinels turned, their forms fading into the shadows as the energy of the planet enveloped them. For a brief moment, everything was still. The humming, the tension, the weight of their struggle, all of it seemed to dissipate into the quiet of the cavern. Then, the core began to shift, its glow dimming slightly, and the hum returned, softer now, more controlled. Ethan and Zara stood there for a long moment, their hands still pressed against the surface, feeling the energy of the planet settle around them. It was done. They had reached the heart. The sentinels were gone, their presence fading like a distant memory. The planet's pulse was no longer an overwhelming force. It was steady, contained, and calm. Ethan exhaled, the breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding rushing out of him. Zara stepped back, her eyes finally meeting his. They didn't need words. The danger had passed. For now, they were safe. The heart of the planet had been reached, and they had stopped the force that had been driving everything. Everything, including the sentinels, from the shadows. There was still much they didn't understand about this planet, but in this moment, Ethan knew they had done the impossible. They had survived, and together, they had conquered the heart of the world.